Regular Show was easily one of the best shows airing on Cartoon Network back in the 2010s. In a time where shows like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, The Amazing World of Gumball, and many more were airing, Regular Show stood out from the competition, bringing a different type of uniqueness that other shows couldn't replicate. And it was personally my favorite show on Cartoon Network, with the show being a bit on the mature side despite being marketed towards a younger demographic, and me already being in my early teens. I felt like the show really grew up alongside me, and man, do I have so many fond memories watching this show. From the crazy adventures to the wacky world to the tons and tons of amazing characters in this series. Regular Show legit had some of my favorite characters in all of fiction, but one character that I undeniably hated since episode 1 was Rigby, because if you remember the earlier seasons, Rigby was a menace. But throughout watching the series, Rigby went from being my most hated character to being my favorite character in the entire show, all throughout the course of only a couple episodes. And I feel like when people think back about Regular Show, they don't highlight Rigby's character growth enough. So today we'll be taking a look at the character arc of Rigby and seeing how he went from being one of the worst characters in the show to arguably one of the best. Now, like I said before, in the earlier seasons of this show, Rigby was a menace. And you wouldn't be wrong for saying that 90% of the bad stuff that happened in the first 2 seasons was because of him. He was so bad that there are lists online of the worst things that he has ever done in the show, with some of them including sending Skips to the moon, betting away all of his friends' souls, learning and using the death punch on all of his friends just to win a game of punchies, and probably one of the worst of them all, taking and altering his best friend's college acceptance letter so that it says that he didn't get in, bringing it back to his house and then watching him read in front of you that he didn't get into the college that he wanted to, and then playing it off like it's not a big deal because you didn't get into the same college with him. Yeah, the more I look back at this, the more I realize Rigby was way worse than I remember. But it was safe to say that Rigby's character might have been one of the most selfish characters that I had ever seen before. Or at least that was until he would start undergoing one of the best character arcs in the entire series. In the season 7 episode The Eileen Plan, Rigby, Mordecai, Margaret, and Eileen are at Eileen's house where she pulls out her old life accomplishments that she wrote back in 6th grade that she wants to accomplish by the time she turns 25. With one of them being that she wants to marry somebody brilliant or super smart, something that Rigby is not. I also found it really funny that while reading this goal out, Rigby stuttered over the words and needed help pronouncing some of them. Just, good comedy. But learning that his girlfriend wanted to marry somebody intelligent makes Rigby very insecure, seeing as he's never even graduated high school.
Hey, Mordecai.
What?
Do you think I'm dumb?
Yes.
This causes him to decide to go back to school to finish his academic career to better himself for Eileen, which in my opinion this was the first episode to really start off Rigby's character arc, because in previous seasons Rigby was selfish and was fine with being selfish as long as he was happy, but this is the first time we see him change and try to better himself for someone else's sake. The episode ends off with Rigby using the knowledge that he's been learning in school to help him and Eileen escape out of a cave, and while Eileen tells Rigby that he doesn't need to be a genius for her, she likes him for him, Rigby still decides that he wants to finish school and get his diploma, not just for Eileen's sake this time, but for himself. In the next episode, Hello China, in an attempt to have more adventure in his life, Benson decides to go to China for a month to teach English. Now, I don't know how he hasn't had enough adventure in his life working at the park, but to each his own. Well, while this is going on, Rigby has failed every foreign language class that he's taken and needs the credits to graduate. So he hides in Benson's luggage all the way to China so that he can take Benson's foreign language class. And I just hope I'm not the only one who's noticed that this man flew all the way to China to take English as a foreign language. Like, does that even count? But regardless, over time, Benson becomes very annoyed with Rigby being in the class because while the kids are supposed to be learning English, they only want to learn the slang and gestures that Rigby's been using. And it just so happens that if Benson's class doesn't learn anything, he'll be stuck in China forever. It's after this that Benson and Rigby have a one-on-one talk, and Benson finally calls out Rigby for his behavior. Benson tells Rigby that he's acting like the way he's always been acting back home, and tells him that if he doesn't actually put in the work to change, he never will.
Do you really want to have flown halfway around the world only to find out you're always going to be the same no matter where you go?
And this is another defining moment for Rigby's character, because for so many seasons, Rigby would be the type of person to say that he was going to do something and never do it. He would always say it would be his last time doing something and then keep the behavior going episode after episode. But Benson was 100% right in this moment. It's easy to want to change and it's easy to say that you will change, but putting in the actual work that it takes to change will always be the hardest part. And if you're not aware or taking the necessary steps to be able able to achieve something, you'll always be in the same position. The episode ends with Rigby organizing a performance with the Chinese students, with them performing a rap about how to write and send a letter in English. Benson gets all the credit for teaching the students English and gets invited to come back to China next year to teach another class, and Rigby passes, getting all his foreign language credits, putting him one step closer to graduating. In the episode Jim Blonsky, Rigby only needs one more class to graduate, that class being gym. But he soon finds out that the coach teaching gym class is his former bully Francis Jim Blonsky, and he wastes no time making Rigby's time in gym class miserable.
You want to fail my class like you failed at life?
No, sir.
Then get moving!
Rigby begins to lose faith that he's going to pass the class and begins to feel hopeless that all his hard work was for nothing. But Mordecai tells Rigby that he shouldn't give up, he just needs to find a way to beat his bully at his own game. Eventually, Rigby gets tired of Jim Blonsky and he challenges him to a game of food run. If Rigby wins, he passes the class. If Jim Blonsky wins, Rigby fails. And Rigby has to wash Jim Blonsky and his little brother's jockstraps for the rest of the semester. The episode ends with Rigby winning the game of food run, to which Jim Blonsky breaks down in tears. But surprisingly, rather than gloating and rubbing it in, Rigby actually gives his former high school bully a pep talk.
Come on, man. High school was a long time ago. You gotta get past the glory days and move on with your life. Focus on the now.
And the two of them actually get cool, with Jim Blonsky offering to put Rigby's face on the back of his varsity jacket. But Jim Blonsky ends up passing Rigby, and with that, Rigby has all the credits that he needs to graduate. To me, this episode showed two aspects of Rigby's character changing. Since the beginning of the show, Rigby was always a slacker looking for any excuse to quit. And when things got hard, he would double down on wanting to quit any task that he was doing. But watching Rigby struggle in gym class, contemplate quitting, and then deciding to see it through all the way showed me that this isn't the same Rigby from season 1. Rigby's more determined and focused on achieving things that he actually wants to accomplish. It also showed a lot of maturity that Rigby was willing to befriend Jim Blonsky, whereas the previous season Rigby probably would have just gloated his win in his face. Now, one aspect of Rigby's character that was shown throughout the earlier seasons of the show was his tendency to feel jealousy or inferiority. And one of the best episodes that displayed this was season 1 episode 10, Don, where we meet Rigby's younger brother Don, who's in better shape than Rigby, more successful, and more liked. And throughout this episode, we see that Rigby always hated having Don around. Not because he didn't like his little brother, but because he was so cool, he made Rigby feel like a loser.
And to top it all off, everyone thinks you're my older brother. I'm the older brother. Me!
But by the end of the episode, Rigby apologizes to Don for the way he's been treating him throughout the years. And Don even expresses to Rigby that he always thought Rigby was the cool one out of the two and always wanted to be just like him.
I get my hair cut like you, I try to look like you, and I don't wear clothes just like you.
And ultimately, the two's relationship grows closer. Now, while we got an early look into Rigby's relationship with his brother, it wouldn't be until season 7 that we would actually learn more about his relationship with his father and his mother. In the episode Rigby Goes to Prom, the high school prom is coming up and Rigby invites Eileen to be his date. Now, Rigby was just planning on taking the bus, but after being told anybody who showed up to prom on a bus would look like a complete loser, Rigby starts to panic looking for a car. After asking everybody that he knows to borrow their car and still being unsuccessful, his little brother Don suggests that there's still one more person that he could ask. That person being their dad. It's here we learn that Rigby has a rough relationship with his dad. His dad views Rigby as a screw up and wishes he was more like Don, praising Don at the dinner table about the work he's doing at his job, but being less than excited about Rigby's news that he's graduating high school. Rigby's dad tells him that he can't borrow the car and the two get into it, and in one of the funniest moments of the episode, Rigby's dad tells him to go to his room, even though Rigby doesn't live with them anymore. And this is made even more funny as Rigby's mom walks up to a door that says Rigby's room and asks Rigby if he knows that he's just in a walk-in closet right now. But at least we know Rigby and his mom have a good relationship because she sneaks him the keys to let him take the car while his dad doesn't know. And it's only until after prom's over and Rigby heads to the after party spot that his dad actually finds out. Which actually leads to a really funny moment where Rigby's dad storms into prom and him and the principal bond over how much stress Rigby caused the both of them. But Rigby's dad ends up finding Rigby, taking the car keys back and driving him and Eileen home. And while he's driving, he just goes in on Rigby about how he's a failure, how he's a disappointment, and how he's a thief. But while he's yelling at Rigby, Rigby's dad isn't paying attention to the road and he ends up driving off a cliff, leaving the car dangling between a branch and the side of the cliff. And even while they're in this situation, Rigby's dad is still blaming Rigby. This leads Rigby to finally stand up to his dad, saying that it doesn't matter what he does, his dad will never trust him and that's on him. And then Rigby proceeds to take the wheel and safely drive the car down the hill, saving him, his dad, and Eileen. The episode ends with Rigby's dad apologizing to Rigby, saying that what he did was amazing and it showed a lot of initiative. He also tells Rigby that he can borrow the car anytime he wants, unfortunately right after he says that the car goes completely flat. So throughout these few episodes sprinkled around season 7, Rigby has went through a lot of development as a character. And the season 7 finale, Rigby's graduation day special, was supposed to be an acknowledgement of all Rigby's change. In the beginning of the episode, Rigby gets called to school by the principal and is told that this year he has to give the graduation day speech while it's broadcasted live on TV. But the only problem is graduation is tomorrow, which leaves Rigby freaking out trying to figure out how to write an inspirational speech. Throughout the episode, Rigby is struggling to come up with his speech, and every time he looks towards his best friend Mordecai for help, Mordecai blows him off. And this is a big theme throughout the episode. In Rigby's eyes, he's been growing and becoming more independent throughout the season, and has basically been doing everything by himself, not requesting help from anyone. So from his perspective, this is the first time in a long time that he's asking his best friend for help and he's blowing him off, which leads to the two of them getting into an argument over the phone. After this, we cut to Rigby's graduation and everybody's there except for Mordecai. I mean, even Eileen's there on FaceTime and she's at her own college graduation. Rigby then makes his entrance to give his speech, falling out of the air off a helicopter. Rigby then attempts to give his speech, but he's stuttering over his words, he's getting flustered, and it's just overall terrible. We then cut to see that Mordecai actually is at the graduation, he's just hiding in the parking lot by Skip's van. And after Rigby storms behind the stage after failing to give his speech, Mordecai then shows up backstage to talk to him. He expressed to Rigby that the reason he's been acting all weird is because it's hard to see that their dynamic is changing. Throughout the entire show, Mordecai was always the friend doing better than Rigby, but throughout season 7, Rigby has done a lot to grow and change as a person, while Mordecai has essentially done nothing, staying the same. But he explains that he was being unfair to Rigby, and that he's proud that he's graduating high school as well as how much he's grown as a person. And this conversation Rigby had with Mordecai gave him the courage he needed to give an inspirational speech.
Once you do the hard stuff, it becomes not that hard.
And yes, after Rigby's speech, everyone started dancing and crying. But while everyone was dancing and crying, everyone from the park got a notification from the dome that they had to come back to the park immediately, which led to Rigby getting ripped away from his graduation almost immediately after he got his diploma. And if you've seen Regular Show before, you know that after this, the park got sent into space, which set up the next season. And this might be one of my biggest gripes with this episode, because Rigby undeniably had one of the best storylines throughout season 7. And like I said in the beginning of the video, it was these sequence of episodes that made Rigby my favorite character in the entire show. Because Rigby was a terrible person in the beginning of the show, selfish, lazy, cowardly, everything that you could think of, Rigby was. But throughout these episodes, we saw Rigby change so much as a character. He started doing things for others and being more considerate. He started to want to better himself and not be in a constant state of complacency. And more importantly, Rigby put in the time and effort to change. Because like I said before, it's easy to want to change, but Rigby actually did change. And him getting his diploma and having his graduation ceremony symbolized all the character growth that he had went through this season. So I just didn't really like the fact that Rigby's accomplishment felt like he got cut short. And low-key, it felt like the climax of season 7 got overshadowed by setting up season 8. But regardless, I will never forget these string of episodes that turned Rigby into one of the best characters in all of Regular Show. And as always, I appreciate you checking out another video. Make sure to hit the like button to help out the channel. I'm going to be making a lot more anime and cartoon content, so subscribe if you're into that type of thing. And until then, it's been your boy CornXV, and I'm off this.
Up in this 10 years old, turn on bus man, so like coke. Pull up in Rovers, it's over. Bitch, I'm cheese Sosa, this coke. Llama, it can't want no hoes. Bottle, it can't let me pour. High as fun, just like a float. Wanna glow up, let me show you. V long thugs. I don't need no her.